What's going on, guys? I'm Michael Anthony, and thank you for checking out my article in this month's Shutter magazine. Guys, this month is the essential gear guide for wedding photographers. And I'm going to talk to you guys about the equipment that I deem that is essential that you have. There's a lot of things that I think you can use in wedding photography, a lot of tools that you can use, if you will, that are not super essential. But today I want to talk to you guys about the things that I think are absolutely important if you are a wedding photographer. First thing, obviously, your primary camera body, okay? And what I'm gonna recommend for something like this is gonna be a camera that can capture action and it can capture portraits, something that's kind of in between both. So if you're a Canon shooter, a 5D Mark IV, in my opinion, is the best wedding camera for a Canon user. For a Sony user, I would say the a7 III, the a7R III, or the a9, all of them are excellent choices. There's really not one that's better, although the a7R III does have a very, very high megapixel count, which may mean your file sizes are bigger, so the a7 III is probably a better choice. For Nikon users, the D800, the D850, and by the time that this video comes out, Nikon will have probably announced their upcoming or rumored mirrorless camera, so that may be a good option as well too to look into. But most importantly, you need to find a camera that can use fast autofocus and dual card slots. Very, very, very important to make sure that you have a backup instantly created in your camera. Which brings me to my next point, a backup camera. Do not try to shoot a wedding without a backup camera, because the second that you do that, something will happen. Case in point, I decided one day to go shoot an engagement session and I left my backup camera at home. Well, that just happened to be the day that I lost my camera in the ocean. The shoot was over, thankfully, at the end of the shoot, but had it not have been, I would have driven 3 hours to this location and lost my camera in the water before taking enough photos for the client. Don't let that happen to you guys, right? The second that you guys get complacent, that's when something will happen, I promise, right? Now, when we get into, after you guys have your first two cameras, let's get into the lenses for a second. Now, for me, I really enjoyed the look of prime lenses. If I could photograph an entire wedding with prime lenses, I would. I love shallow depth of field when there's a time for it. I love the ability to have sharp glass with great color rendition. And if I was just starting today, the three lenses that I would choose as a wedding photographer would be a 35 prime, a 50 prime, and an 85 prime. And if you had to pick one to start with, the 50 is probably your best bet because you're going to get a mixture of a wide angle and a telephoto, okay? Now, when you have those three lenses, and you're talking about primes here, not your zooms yet, those three lenses will let you photograph the majority of a wedding day. Now, if you have a camera that does, let's just say you have the same camera that's your backup and your primary, there's nothing wrong with using a 35 on one and an 85 on the other and being able to document an entire wedding with those two lenses only. I've done it before, and they are some of my favorite weddings when I actually when I use those two lenses. Getting into our zoom lenses that I think are really important. An ultra wide angle, and I'm going to talk general here. A 16 to 35 is accessible to pretty much every camera manufacturer. There's a lot of them on the market because they've been around for a long time. Only more recently are we starting to see the ultra wide zoom lenses become available. But a 16 to 35, in my opinion, is necessary. But you can also do something like an 11 to 24 if you're Canon, or a 12 to 24 if you're Nikon or Sony. Now, in my opinion here, guys, I would rather use a 16 to 35 for photographing the majority of the things that we run into on the day, like bride prep, groom prep, and the reception. The only time I really use my 12 to 24 is when we get into our ultra wide creative portraits. So there is a place for that lens, but because it's f4, I don't use it nearly as often, and also because of the distortion that it inherently will produce as well. Getting into our mid-range zoom, a 24 to 70. That mid-range zoom is the most versatile lens I think that money can buy. If you were stuck on a desert island and you only had one lens, that would be the one lens that you would want to be stuck there with, okay? If you go on vacation, that's the one lens I would recommend bringing. Now, even though I love the look of prime lenses, a 24 to 70 will be the most versatile, and you can most definitely photograph an entire wedding with just that one lens alone. 70 to 200. This is a great lens for a portrait photographer, but as a wedding photographer, it is absolutely necessary. When you guys get into a church, sometimes you're not going to have the ability to get up and close to your subject. And if you're stuck with like an 85, or if you're stuck with that 70 millimeter from the 24 to 70, you're not going to be able to get close enough for your subjects, right? I would even go as far as to say is if you're a wedding photographer, not only would I look at the 70 to 200, I would also look like a teleconverter as well, so that you can get extra range on that particular lens. I've used that plenty of times. It's got me out of a jam, so I definitely think that that's a necessary lens. And then lastly, the macro lens. And a macro lens is not something that you're going to use often. In fact, I don't even photograph all of the details with a macro lens. But photographing things like rings or even close-up portraits of your bride or groom, the macro lens is incredibly versatile, and it is a great addition. For you Canon users, I've used the 100 millimeter macro. And for Sony users, I've used a 90 millimeter macro, and those are two of my favorites. I haven't used any of the shorter ones, which I know are available through the other manufacturers, but as long as you can get that 1:1 magnification, I think that you guys will be in very good shape. And lastly, let's talk about lights. Now, you guys know I'm a big fan of the ProPhoto B1 and the B2 system, but we're talking today again about the things that are absolutely necessary. And those lights, while they are majorly convenient to have, the A1 or a smaller speed light system is definitely required. You're gonna have to have multiple speed lights on a wedding day, right? So we use 3 to 4 speed lights every time that we're at a wedding, and that's because we'll have 2 off camera during a reception, and then me as a primary shooter and my second shooter will each have 1 on camera. And usually we're sharing lights now because these lights are all lithium based, right? So I would recommend the ProPhoto A1. I would recommend your camera's brand manufacturer. There's a lot of options for lights. It doesn't really matter. As long as you have multiple, use the ones that work for you, and start with your small lights and then work your way up the ladder. I would go with the speed lights first, and then when you guys are ready for it, once you guys have all the speed lights you need, get into something like a ProPhoto B1X. That's a great addition, and it has a power of 7 to 8 speed lights, so you will not need to combine all those lights together just to get the output that you would get with one B1. So that is my my required list for wedding photographers. And guys, every single year gear changes, so this particular video may be out of date in a year or 2 from now, but some form or version of those lenses and cameras that I just described will always be what you guys need to photograph a wedding. Thank you guys for checking out this article. I really do appreciate it. Can't wait to catch you guys next month in Shutter Magazine.